I am still on my trip back from Hill City. I am headed up toward Leeds, South Dakota, and that actually brings up a good point. So I called this video The Survivors, and I wanted to talk a little bit about in this video. Some rural areas are growing or thriving or succeeding in various ways that others are not. I would say that rural towns that survive often have some kind of a minimal size to them. What I've been seeing here in North Dakota is a lot of the towns that are shrinking and dying out, basically, are the ones that don't have a whole lot to begin with. Other things that help are you've got some good natural resource nearby, possibly, so you have an extraction economy. Maybe you're close to a city. You might be at just a handy location where railroad and highways happen to cross. Or maybe recreational opportunities. That actually helps a lot of the communities in the Black Hills, as this is, as you can see, a scenic area with pretty good amount of recreational opportunity. My experience has been, now I'm talking experience now, not that's why you don't see a citation down there. Transportation has killed a lot of these rural areas. If you can travel easily, you're a lot less likely to shop at your more, shall we say, limited local stores. I mean, hell, let's just admit it. You know, your grocery store has 3 aisles of groceries, or you could go to the city where they've got gobs and gobs of aisles. Well, if it's easy to get to the city, why would you shop locally? Unless you just have this, no, I'm duty bound, I must support my local business. And even then you're like, oh yeah, I gotta run to the city for all the stuff I can't find locally. And that kills the local store. The owner and the family end up, maybe they have to find other employment or they leave. Without that business there, that causes other businesses to lose custom. And before you know it, Main Street's dried up and there's nothing left. People are leaving. The fewer businesses there are, the fewer employment opportunities there are for people, the less there is in the local economy. And again, they're going to neighboring towns. It's in some ways, well, okay, for example, there's a town about 13 miles west of here on a nice, easy paved road. At one time, it would have been gravel, not very good, and so people would have been more likely to shop at that small town. But as transport became easier, why shop at the local grocery store? When I said 3 aisles, that was actually the store I was picturing. They struggled. They managed to make a go of it a lot longer than many similar towns, but in the end, dried up. I lived in 2 different towns that were actually within driving distance of a larger town, not a city, but a larger town, and lost their grocery stores. Now, where I live now, we're very insulated, both because we have some size and because of just plain distance. I mean, I could make a driving video every time I drive out of town because it's so flippin' far to anything. And so far, transportation has not overcome the distance aspect. I will also note that sometimes big businesses make decisions to kill small towns. J.C. Penney, for example, has closed a lot of small stores, even if the stores were turning a profit, just because they weren't turning enough profit. My hometown lost its J.C. Penney that way. Big businesses also don't like to work with small retailers because they just don't buy enough. There's a local business in town that struggled because big businesses just didn't want to sell to them because there just wasn't the quantity. And closed their doors. It was a clothing store, I'll say that. And then a lot of small towns, think Appalachia especially, or heck, North Dakota with the agriculture industry. What if your town is based around a local industry like coal? That's killed a lot of Appalachian towns. I have a link in here somewhere about a town in, well, about West Virginia, basically. And how many areas in West Virginia have struggled because the coal industry has dried up. And that makes people desperate, when you can't work. It makes you maybe vote for people you might not have voted for. One of the troubles with that, you're looking for somebody to blame, because it really isn't your fault that the local coal mine is closed down. And a common place to place the blame, scapegoat, sorry, that's the word I was looking for. A common scapegoat would be things like, environmental regulations. That's an easy scapegoat. And then you can blame it on a particular party or whatever. But really, coal is dying because of natural gas. But that's just how it is. But that doesn't change how you view it. Here in North Dakota, some of our older people will remember a time when there were lots of elevators, lots of grain buyers, when you could, lots of cattle buyers. And all of those have been consolidated. So maybe you have one grain buyer, maybe one cattle buyer, maybe they're not even in the town. Maybe you have to drive to get to them. I know people who drive hundreds of miles to deliver grain just to get a little bit better price, or to find somebody interested in buying it. There are a lot of things going on destroying rural economies. And you have a small population anyway, which makes it harder to keep things available. Local businesses will often have several components to them that do not turn a profit, that are buoyed up by their profitable parts of their businesses, just because they are pretty much offering a service just to support their local community, even though they could make more money by closing that part of their business down. I definitely got to be careful there, not give any local specific examples, but oh yeah, that's an issue. And at what point does the business say, yeah, this just isn't financially feasible anymore? When the economy goes belly up or whatever, which happens periodically. I don't care where you live. So anyway, those are all negatives that are killing small towns and rural areas. And, the effect is there in the big cities. It just plays out in a different way. And one thing I haven't brought up is online. Honestly, with the death of our local clothing store, I suppose I could go to the city and buy clothes. Or I could get on my computer and buy clothes and have a lot more selection than even this local city offers. And I don't have to drive to get it. So I'll be honest, I'm part of the problem too, doing my online shopping. Now, if I can support a local business, I prefer to do that. But I don't really want to drive to support a business. I don't enjoy shopping. You may have noticed that most of these road trips I do don't involve a whole lot of shopping. Because it's not my thing. Sometimes, I enjoy a used bookstore. I will do that if I get somewhere where there's a used bookstore. There's only one that I'm boycotting because the owner's an asshole. I actually enjoy stationery stores, even though most of them don't sell fountain pens. But, recreational shopping is not my thing. And if I can shop for it online, I'd prefer not to shop for it at a store. So, there you go. Now, what we're coming into is actually a success story. You may notice some bare hillsides here. There was a forest fire. I don't have the date written down because I kind of forgot this was in the video. But we're coming into the Lead Deadwood area. So I was going on about how towns die. Well, I also need to remind you that there are success stories. Now, I won't say Lead Deadwood is an amazing success story, because the population is still shrinking in the area. But regardless, I'd say it's a success story, and it shows how things can turn around, change, or at least halt for the better. Deadwood, which we will not be going through, is really pushing tourism. Deadwood is what was his name? Wild Bill Hickok and a couple others are famous there. Of course, there was a TV show, which I've honestly never seen, a few years ago in Deadwood. That was set in 1800s Deadwood, when things were a bit more exciting. It was a big gold mining area. That is no longer. I'll get into that here in a bit. Now Deadwood gets by in a lot of ways because of the tourism and the gambling industry. Lead, of course, takes advantage of that. I am actually right here turning up, and I'm going to go up Leeds Main Street. If I were to turn to the right, I would go through Deadwood. You've been there in other videos, so I don't need to talk about that. So Deadwood went toward gambling. Not that there isn't any in Lead, but it's less of it. Lead also is conveniently close to Deadwood, where maybe you're not right in the heart of the gambling, so if you're staying overnight, that may be a handy place. And boy, this must have been a busy corner, because I've been sitting there quite a long time, haven't I? I will just note, rural U.S. is complicated, and a lot of my depressing stuff doesn't play out the same. North Dakota actually has some pretty high salaries. Oil is on a downturn, but at the same time, unemployment in North Dakota is very, very low. So we have a lot going for it. The U.S. is huge. So you can't just say, oh, yeah, this is rural U.S., because it's not. It's really, really hard to generalize rural U.S. But I will say some of what I'm talking about can lead to your unemployment, can lead to why religion is a bigger thing in rural areas, can explain why education is lower in rural areas. Heck, if I want to go get continuing ed for my job, I have to drive for it. I know a lady who's a nurse and getting her continuing ed in Miles City, Montana right now. So she has to get a motel room. She has to drive a ridiculous distance. If I lived in other parts of the country that are more urban, I'd probably have a master's degree right now. But I have to drive flipping forever to get one. Or do a online one that isn't really in something I want. So, and now I'm at that point in my career where I'm starting to question if it would be worth the money I'd pay for it anyway. Racism, isolation, those things all, again, come up partly because of isolation and distance. So we're starting to come up on Leeds Main Street. This is an interesting trip downhill and uphill. I think I've taken you downhill in a different video, so I thought I'd throw in the uphill version because it's just interesting to see it. It is a unique main street for the Dakotas. Those of you out in places like Colorado and mountainous areas are probably going, yeah, not so unique, but whatever, I don't care what you think. So Leeds, South Dakota was actually, and it's spelled like lead, or like lead, depending on how you want to pronounce it. But it was settled in 1876 because of gold, and then incorporated in 1877. So it's got a longer history than where I live. The elevation, interestingly, is 1,589 meters, or for those of you who use a less rational measurement system, 5,213 feet. Although I'm curious where exactly in Lead that is measured. Just because we're climbing. And I drive a stick shift, and when I get to the red light at the top of this, that's interesting in a stick shift. Currently, the population is right around 3,000 people. Which is down. I will come back to that. Now, this is the site of the Homestake Mine. You will have seen hints of that along the way here. I think I passed a museum related to it. And the pit, which I was hoping would show up as behind this fence, but you just can't see it from the car. So I've got to go to Lead and walk around with a camcorder. Anyway, the Homestake Mine was actually the deepest at 2,510 meters, or for those of you, here's the main street. Those of you who like the other measurement system that's used in just a handful of countries, 8,240 feet deep. It was the largest mine in the Western Hemisphere, most productive mine in the Western Hemisphere, and it closed in 2002 because all good things must come to an end, which I imagine was devastating for the lead economy, but at the same time, looking at the population figures, lead hit its peak in 1910 at 8,392 people, and it has been downhill ever since. In part, the wildcatters kind of pulled out, your mines grew more automated, all those kind of things, machinery. It was a natural thing, but that's a loss of 5,000 people since 1910. So a loss of more people than currently live in the town now. And so I imagine the mine itself was slowing down, which also was part of just that gradual shrinkage. Now, I find interesting is Phoebe Hearst, who's the wife of George Hearst, a principal of the mine, she actually was kind of a leader in establishing the Hearst Public Library. In 1900, she opened a Hearst free kindergarten for mine workers. So she is thinking of the people. There's an interesting red light when you're driving a stick shift like me. With the mine superintendent, they also created the Homestake Opera House, which still exists despite a fire in 1984, and the Recreation Center. And she donated regularly to churches and college scholarships. So there's somebody using their wealth for good, for more than just employment. Well, let's give her some credit. True story, 1974, most of the town of Lead that's the high school over on your left. Kind of a cool looking building, by the way. Most of Lead was added to the National Register of Historic Places. But the population has, like I said, been in a steady decline. And same story in Deadwood. Now the schools combined in 1971 because they're both declining. And the elementary school remains in Deadwood. The middle school and high school are in Lead. Over the last 10 years, this would be since 2007, there's been a 14% decline in enrollment from 791 kids to 692. That's K-12. Bigger than where I teach, and in a much smaller area. Although, thanks to geography, I don't know that consolidation is terribly likely. And it's projected to be down to 513 by 2025. My own school, just for comparison, 450 kids, K-12. Size larger than the state of Rhode Island. I forgot to look up the size of this school, but it is mountainous terrain, so again, it's a different situation. My own school will probably be around 400, maybe 300 and some upper 300s by the same time. So we're shrinking too, but we're shrinking a lot slower. And we have, a different situation. Now, one thing standing in Lead's way, which is kind of convenient that my babbling brought it out right here, this is difficult terrain to build housing in. So even with people coming in, where do you put them? And a lot of the housing in Lead is old, very small lots. I went on Realtor.com and was just looking at some of the houses just for fun, and oh my God. I found several smaller or close to the size of what I own, 672 square feet, but the lots are a lot smaller and, as for my perspective, not as good for gardening, more expensive than this house, and not in as good a shape. So, Lead is... The housing will be interesting there. How do you build houses on this kind of terrain? It's not easy. And most people don't want a garden like I do, but they do want a nice big green lawn. So you're not going to attract them. Now, what's interesting, because I said the survivors, this is my title for this, LEAD is actually undergoing a physics revolution, which makes me think it might be kind of a fun place to be a high school physics teacher. And hey, I have a degree in physics. Although other issues, financial, may make it less attractive because it is a tourism area and, like I said, a little more expensive to live there. And South Dakota teacher salaries are terrible. But the Homestake Mine, which closed in 2002, is actually now the site of the Deep Underground Science and Engineering Laboratory, DUSEL. It's an NSF, National Science Foundation, facility for low background experiments with things like neutrinos, dark matter, and various other physics, especially nuclear physics, biology, and mine engineering types of things. Now, I will admit that the mine got a little flooded when it was abandoned, and there was some rusting of equipment. So I guess it was full of water. It was about 4,000 feet deep of water that had to be pumped out. But hey, it wouldn't surprise me. I didn't research this, but now I'm wondering if maybe some of the research facilities you see deep underground with lakes that you're paddling around on them in canoes might be there. Don't know. Now I want to look that up. But I've put this off long enough. I'm going to throw in a link, so maybe you can do your own research too, to the Sanford Underground Research Facility, which is in the Homestake Mine. And they are conveniently close to much larger spearfish. You can go the way I am going to spearfish and have a gorgeous, amazing commute. Or if time is an issue, you can go down to Deadwood, and then it's not too far to the interstate from Deadwood, and Spearfish is right on the interstate. So you can live in Deadwood. If you're a motorcycler, I guess you can live in Sturgis. Sturgis was in the news recently because of their high school, but we'll let that one go, and you can look that one up yourself. I'm not going to provide a link. But what's kind of fun about the Sanford Underground Facility is it is the deepest underground laboratory in the United States. So this is why I brought it up. And now this is me again setting my research to the side. Here is a town making lemons out of lemonade. Yes, their major employer closed. But that mine is a wonderful resource. Now, will it attract the same number of workers? Probably not. Same kind of workers? Definitely not. Will it attract people? Yes. And what a boon, as I said, if you're the physics teacher in Lead, South Dakota. I'm actually considering, is there a way I can tie it into my own physics? Because not that I live in Lead, I'm several hours away from Lead. But I am looking at how can I tie this into either my physics or my STEM class. Because, yeah, I see some potential here. And this brings in a new group of people to live in Lead, South Dakota. Lead could become a hub of physics research, of a certain type of research, obviously. Lead is also has some great amenities. If you're into shopping, Rapid City isn't that far away. Scenic area for sure. Definitely have to drive. It's not... nobody's going to believe this is an urban area, but at the same time, lots of outdoor recreational opportunities available. Terry Peak is a downhill ski area. We passed it. I didn't note it, but it's there. Spearfish Canyon we're coming up on, Needles Highway, Mount Rushmore, lots and lots of hiking opportunities, mountain biking opportunities, rock climbing opportunities. Rapid City may not be urban, but it's not small either. Rapid City is a darn nice city, actually. I'd be happy to have Rapid City in my backyard. There's just a lot here. And that's part of what some of the rural areas survive is because they are close to things. Or they do like Lead and they've got several things going for them. Other areas like may have other things to capitalize on. We've been witnessing the death of small agricultural businesses in North Dakota. Small farms are disappearing. Farms are getting bigger and bigger. But at the same time, we're seeing businesses sprouting up that are not so much raw producers, but ag processors of various types. You know, canola oil in your grocery store. That's a market that was created because of people saying, hey, let's produce, we've got this stuff here. Why aren't we producing it here instead of sending it off to someone else? That's created employment locally. So things like that. The oil industry, well, before oil industry was really taking off, Watford City, North Dakota, which I've taken you through and has exploded in recent years. Watford City was actually attracting some smaller tech companies. My own town doesn't have a single big employer, but we've attracted a lot of smaller businesses that just keep it going. And as I said, it doesn't hurt that we're far enough away. But you need some amenities, and that is one thing a lot of rural areas don't have and they don't want to spend money on. And I have voted against a few amenities because I didn't want my taxes to go up. And yet, at the same time, a certain number of amenities do help attract people that maybe would say, okay, yeah, it's a small town, but at least we've got these things available. So it's a balancing act. Is it worth it? Is it not worth it? This road that we're on right here actually goes through my town, Highway 85. But I'm going to turn off it. We're turning down into Spearfish Canyon now, which seems like a convenient place to stop. I like that I've left this video on a somewhat more hopeful note. The towns that survive maybe can reinvent local businesses the way Deadwood and Lead have. They can capitalize on their proximity to other attractions like urban areas, recreational areas, major landmarks. They can do like my town. We're on the crossroads of two major highways. Highway 85 is a major north-south route for the area. These are things that help keep a town alive. It helps if you have some minimal size. How do you build something if you can't find workers to staff it and people to shop at it or use it? So there is hope for rural areas, but they are going to have to change. And the idea that what worked before will work again, not so much. So anyway, I want to save Spearfish Canyon for another video. I'm not 100% sure what it'll be about, but what I'm leaning toward, I referenced them, but maybe it's time to look at some of the negative things that are out there about rural America and really delve into some of those. So I hope this is interesting. I would encourage you to visit Lead, South Dakota, and the Black Hills more generally. It's quite impressive and unique. And heck, go visit Devil's Tower in Wyoming while you're at it, and come on up to North Dakota, visit the North Dakota Badlands, and find out that North Dakota isn't quite the frozen wasteland that propaganda would have you believe, or the polluted wreck overrun by the oil industry that other propaganda would have you believe. So, yeah, hope it was interesting, hope it was useful, and next week we'll be going down Spearfish Canyon. So I thank you for watching. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.